Hello and welcome to Tête-à-Tête, France 24's flagship interview program. We're in New York on the sidelines of the United Nations General Assembly. And our guest today is the President of Moldova, Maia Sandu. Mrs. President, thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you.
The NATO Secretary General, Jens Stoltenberg, said just very recently, we have to prepare ourselves for a long war in Ukraine. Do you agree with him, and do you worry about the war dragging on in Ukraine?
Of course I do worry if the war continues for a long time. At the same time, I do believe that Ukraine needs to be supported for the Ukrainian people to recover all its territories, and this is the only solution to this war.
Is Ukraine getting enough help? President Zelensky complains that the very high-end military equipment like long-range missiles, F-16 fighter jets are not getting there soon enough. Do you agree with him that the West is not doing enough?
I am very grateful to all those who have been supporting Ukraine all these years with military support, with economic support, but I do believe that we should support Ukraine more so that it could win this war quicker.
Right. Is there a risk of Western fatigue with Ukraine, that the support might win because people say, well, this is going to be a never-ending war?
There is always a risk, but from the discussions that I've been having with leaders of different countries, I do see strong commitment to continue to support Ukraine as long as it's needed.
Obviously, you're on the front line, if I may use the word, of this war. Is there a risk, if the war drags on, that Russia might decide to attack your country?
Ukraine keeps us safe, and we're very grateful to the Ukrainian soldiers, to the brave Ukrainian people and Ukrainian leadership. In the meantime, of course, Russia tries to threaten and to undermine our efforts to stay part of the free world, to strengthen the institutions, and to move on our EU path. And here we also want to express our gratitude for the support we get from the democratic world in resisting and becoming more resilient. And we have been making some progress. For instance, you know, in the past, Russia has been blackmailing us using the energy weapon. Today, we, on the right bank of Dnistru, with the exception of the Transnistrian region, we don't consume any Russian gas, compared to a 100 dependence just 12 months ago.
Right. So you're saying there is support. However, Russia can easily use the 1,500 troops it has stationed in Transnistria, this breakaway region. Are you seeing any indication that Vladimir Putin might decide to use them or attack Moldova in order to destabilize you, because the situation might be more or less the same in Ukraine, so he can turn his attention elsewhere?
There are some 1,200 Russian troops which stationed illegally in the Transnistrian region of Moldova. We have managed to keep the situation stable. Of course, the risk is always there as long as you have the Russian troops on the territory, and as long as you have the weapons, because there is also a big deposit of weapons from the Soviet times. But as of now, we have managed to keep the situation stable, and we hope to be able to maintain it stable.
Right. Do you have guarantees from the West that if this was to happen, the West would support Moldova as it has supported Ukraine?
We do receive support from the West. Since the first day of the war, we have started to work seriously on strengthening the capacity of our defense system. We have been doing that by increasing our internal budget for defense, but also receiving substantial support, I would say, from the NATO member states, and having a new program of cooperation with NATO in general.
Right. You just mentioned NATO. As per your constitution, Moldova is a neutral country. Are you in favor of changing the constitution in order maybe to allow eventually in the future Moldova to join NATO? I just noticed that your foreign minister attended the NATO summit in Vilnius. Is this what you want for your country?
We do have good cooperation with NATO. It didn't start yesterday. It started many years ago. And we do value this cooperation. It helps us strengthen our capacity to defend Moldova. At the same time, we do have the provision of neutrality in the constitution. And the majority of Moldovans still believe that the constitution should not be changed. We can discuss why the majority still want Moldova to stay neutral. I would not believe that most of these people think that neutrality can keep us safe. I do believe that the Russian propaganda plays a role here because many Moldovans believe that the moment we start talking about changing the constitution, Russia can attack Moldova because you remember this was one of the narratives that Russia used when it attacked Ukraine, saying that because Ukraine wants to become a NATO country, Russia has to defend itself, which is a lie. We do have a big issue of fighting disinformation and propaganda in Moldova. So in the meantime, we're trying to keep our people safe, but we are safe today mainly thanks to the courage of the Ukrainian people. At the same time, we're investing in our defense system, and we're trying to become better at fighting disinformation.
Right. A few months ago, you said there was a coup attempt organized with the support of Russia. It's not very clear. Do you today have evidence pointing the finger directly to the Kremlin?
Yes, we saw different ways through which Russia wants to undermine our efforts, and the energy blackmail, when Russia saw that we managed to diversify and we don't depend anymore on the Russian gas, using its proxies in Moldova, some corrupt groups, Russia tried to overthrow our government. Fortunately, we knew about these attempts and we managed to warn the population not to participate in the violent protests that these groups were trying to organize. Now, of course, Russia is moving on and trying to use other types of interference mechanisms. Of course, disinformation and propaganda are very important, but also interference with the elections. And Moldova has local elections this year. We have presidential elections next year. We saw this year during the elections in one of the regions of Moldova where with dirty money, Russia managed to influence significantly the results of the elections. And this is where the biggest worry comes now.
Have you seen attempts from Russia to send mercenaries? Obviously, there was a lot of talk about Wagner or other kinds in Moldova.
We saw at the beginning of the year, and this is when I spoke publicly about it, attempts to send to Moldova people who would participate in violent protests because Russia failed to identify such people in Moldova when it paid protests, and it wanted to transform these protests into violent protests and then to force the constitutional authorities into some kind of negotiations on changing the power. So yes, Russia did try to send some violent people to Moldova, but our institutions, our border police and the others have been vigilant enough to check on all these people and to make sure that we don't allow them to enter the country.
All right. Moldova has expelled the majority of the staff at the Russian embassy in Chisinau. You just expelled the head of Sputnik News from Chisinau. Is the next step cutting relations, diplomatic relations between Moldova and Russia?
We have been taking these measures because Kremlin does not respect the independence and the sovereignty of our country, and we will continue to take measures if the actions and rhetoric of Kremlin will continue to undermine our plans and the development path of Moldova.
So cutting relations is a possibility. It's on the table if the situation
I'm
continues.
not saying that this is something that we discuss, but what I'm saying, we will do everything possible to defend our citizens and our country.
Right. EU membership, the EU Chief Commissioner Ursula von der Leyen repeated just a few days ago that she wants Moldova, among others, to become a member of the EU. You said the objective is 2030 to achieve this. You already are about to begin the talks. However, there is still the issue of Transnistria, which is not under your control. So this would seem a problem to get into the EU if you don't have territorial control. How do you make progress while having this big problem on the eastern flank of Moldova?
Yes, we did say that we should be ready for the for becoming part of the EU by 2030, and we have a lot to do. We do believe in a merit-based process. We're not asking for shortcuts. And in addition to the major external challenges, we do have some internal challenges. For instance, the justice sector reform, the anti-corruption efforts, strengthening the capacity of the institutions which have to prevent and fight corruption. These are all important problems. In addition to that, of course, there is the issue of the Transnistrian conflict. And our discussions with the EU have been that we need to focus on the reforms. Of course, we need to try to solve the conflict. And in the best case scenario, we should be able to become a EU member state as a reintegrated state. But there is not a discussion which would make it, if there is not a solution to the conflict, then there is no possibility for EU integration. We do believe that when Ukraine wins the war, there might be geopolitical opportunity to solve the conflict, but the condition is to solve it peacefully. And in the meantime, of course, we're working, preparing for this geopolitical opportunity.
Just as the last question, when do you expect formal talks with the EU on membership to begin?
There is going to be a decision, or there is going to be a meeting of the European Council by the end of this year, and we do hope to see a positive decision on the initiation of the negotiations. And then we will be ready to start the next steps. Again, as I said, there are many things that we have been working already, and there are others that will have to start working, but the sooner the better.
President Maia Sandu, thank you very much for appearing on our show from New York City, and thank you all for watching it.